for the oceans. Sustainable forest management and sustainable wood use as carbon sink or renewable energy can contribute to climate change mitigation. Japan has restored its devastated post-war forests to one of the highest forest coverage in the world, and continues to support developing countries' efforts against deforestation based on past experience. This seminar will welcome 4 speakers and explore a way to promote both mitigation and adaptation through forest activities in developing countries. First, I invited Mr. Yutaka Kawashima, Forestry Agency, Government of Japan, for opening remarks. So, Mr. Kawashima, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hirata. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kawashima from Forestry Agency, Japan. Thank you very much for attending the seminar, Sustainable Forest Management for the Mitigation and Adaptation Against Climate Change, hosted by Forestry and Forest Products Research Institute, FFPRI, co-hosted by International Tropical Timber Organization, ITTO, and Forestry Agency of Japan. Forests contribute to the people's lives and economies, as well as climate change mitigation and adaptation through their multiple functions, including land conservation, water resource conservation, and biodiversity conservation, and prevention of global warming. According to the IPCC 6th assessment report, afforestation, deforestation, improved forest management, agroforestry, and soil carbon sequestration are currently the only widely practiced carbon dioxide removal methods. The IPCC 6 assessment reports also pointed out that the improved and expanded use of wood products sourced from sustainably managed forests also has potential through the allocation of harvested wood to longer-lived products, increasing recycling or material substitution. Forests, which cover about 30% of the world land area, are the largest sink of greenhouse gases, except for oceans. On the other hand, according to the IPCC 6 assessment reports, in 2019, approximately 22% of global GHG emissions came from agriculture, forestry, and other land use, a FORU sector. The FAO Global Forest Resource Assessment 2020 mentioned that the world has lost 178 million hectares of forest since 1990, mainly due to the conversion of forest land to agricultural land. Forest loss leads to the loss of benefit from multiple functions of forest and increases global warming due to a decrease in the global warming prevention function of forest. At COP26 in Glasgow, UK in 2021, Japan, along with over 140 countries and regions, endorsed the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use, GLD, which aims to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. At COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt in 2022, Japan committed to the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, FCLP, an international initiative to promote the GLD initiatives together with 32 countries and regions. In Japan, after World War II, the devastation of forests has caused frequent landslides and flood damage, resulting in the loss of many lives. In 1950s, large-scale afforestation using native coniferous species started in the degraded areas. And today, Japan has a forest ratio of 68.4%, making it the third forested country among OECD countries. Planted forests account for about 40% of the total forest area in Japan, and we are promoting cyclical use of planted forest by cutting, using, planting, nurturing to enhance carbon dioxide absorption of forests and the expansion of carbon stocks of timber products. And Japan is susceptible to mountainous disasters and floods caused by earthquakes and typhoons. And recent climate change has led to an increase in the severity of mountainous disasters and changes in the form of the occurrence. In Japan, approximately 50% of the total forest area is designated as protection forest to demonstrate the multiple functions of forests, such as land conservation and water resource conservation. The Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute, FFPRI, defines these forest functions as FDRR, Forest-Based Disaster Risk Reduction, and conduct research to promote them. And also, Japan has been working with the International Tropical Timber Organization, ITTO, and under JICA Technical Cooperation, Japan has been working with Kenya since 1985 to promote sustainable forest management and timber use. This seminar will invite speakers from Forestry Agency Japan, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Government of Kenya, International Tropical Timber Organization, and Forestry and Forest Products Research Institute Japan. By presentations and panel discussions, we aim to deepen our understanding on the role of sustainable forest management and timber use for mitigation and adaptation against climate change, and challenges of forestry activities to promote both mitigation and adaptation. I would like to conclude my opening remarks with the hope that this seminar will provide useful information to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kawashima. So I would like to move presentation session. So first speaker is Miho Echizen. She is the officer of Forestry Agency, Government of Japan, and she is also negotiator in this COP. Today she talked about sustainable wood use for carbon neutral. So, yes, here. Miho, please, floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hirata. Thank you for your introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great honor to be able to introduce our policy and implementation of Forestry Agency of Japan here. This wonderful cartoon must grab your attention. This is a cartoon drawn by my colleague, and you will find her work in the upcoming slides. So please keep your eyes on the screen during my presentation. Japan is blessed with the environment favorable to the growth of forests, thanks to the sufficient precipitation nationwide. Forest covers more than 60% of the land in Japan. About 40% of these forests are planted forests, mainly occupied by conifers, such as Japanese cedars and Japanese cypress. However, in the past, excessive harvesting led to land degradation and caused large-scale floodings and landslides. To control disasters and restore the rich forest, the government has promoted afforestation activities, which once again restored the abundant forest resources. As a result of intensive afforestation in the past, planted forest area over 60 years old accounts for half of the forest area, and the forest accumulation has increased sixfold in the last 50 years. On the other hand, trees grow slower with age, and the forest capacity to absorb carbon dioxide is declining. Forests ready to be logged can be harvested and reforested to create young forests with high growth rate, thereby enhancing carbon sequestration, while utilizing harvested wood can contribute to climate change mitigation through carbon storage and substituting energy-intensive materials. This circular use of forest resources, harvest, use, plant, and grow, is an essential mechanism for sustainable forest management and sustainable wood use, which contribute carbon neutrality. To make effective use of harvested wood, which has been replaced by energy-intensive materials with modernization, a number of measures have been implemented in Japan. I would like to introduce some of them hereafter. The largest proportion of timber use is in the building sector. In Japan, 80% of low-rise residential buildings are wooden structure, but the rate of wood use in the non-residential and mid and high-rise building sector is low. In order to achieve wooden construction in this area, for a start, a law was enacted to promote wooden structure in public buildings in 2010. 10 years later, in 2021, Act on Promoting of Wood Use in Buildings to contribute to the realization of a decarbonized society was enacted to further expand this initiative to private buildings. Under this act, building owners may conclude agreements with the national and the local governments regarding the promotion of wood use in buildings. This agreement provides benefit to the builders, such as obtaining technical advice and information, as well as an increase in the possibility of receiving financial support from the government. Also, the development and dissemination of mass timber technology has been promoted for the mid to high-rise wooden buildings. For example, CLT can shorten construction time and simplify foundation construction compared to concrete. The government encourages technological development and disseminating architectural design of wooden buildings with CLT based on the roadmap to promote the use of CLT. In Japan, fire resistance has been a major issue for wooden buildings, and the private sector has been actively developing the fire-resistant materials. Successful development of 3-hour-long fire-resistant materials eliminated restriction on the number of stories imposed on wooden buildings for fire resistance performance. Bringing these technologies together, a plan is underway to construct the world's largest wooden buildings in the center of the metropolis of Tokyo. To develop these technologies horizontally, public-private relationship named Wood Change Council has been established with the participation of a wide range of stakeholders, including economic, construction, and timber supply-related organizations. Wood Change is a slogan that aims for a shift to a sustainable society of a wide use of wood, such as changing daily necessities to wood products and constructing buildings and houses with wood. This council discusses solutions to the challenges of wood use, disseminate advanced practices, and share information on wood use. This council also publishes promotional materials for owners that include standing design of wooden buildings, case studies of wooden buildings, and the significance and benefits of wood use. We also encourage behavioral and lifestyle change among customers, the importance of which was indicated in the IPCC AL6 report. We have award schemes to recognize outstanding timber constructions and wooden products. And also, we promote wood education activities, which provide opportunities for children to play with wooden toys and experience woodworkings from a young age. We are also involved in international cooperation to disseminate these Japanese knowledges and experiences in promoting sustainable wood use. The Forestry Agency is supporting projects to promote sustainable wood use in Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia through ITTO from 2021, and just started in Malaysia this year. You'll hear more about this project, so I will explain in brief here. But there are 3 pillars in this project. First is improvement of policy framework to drive domestic consumption, such as establishment of a council for wood use promotion and preparation of policy recommendations focusing on the specific country issues. Second is strengthening capacity of the stakeholders, including providing seminar to introduce career development and a timber architect, as a timber architect, and the training to build wooden model houses for architecture students, as well as awareness raising training on legality verification for government officials and forestry companies. Third is promoting timber utilization in line with local needs, such as introducing innovative technologies and techniques for bioenergy development. This is the end of my presentation. I would be more than happy if you could take some ideas away from my presentation and implement sustainable wood use in your country or in your community. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Echizen. So wonderful and beautiful presentation. So second speaker is Mr. George Tarus from Forest Conservation. He is Forest Conservation Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Government of Kenya. Today, he talked about his experience of sustainable forest management and climate change measures. So, Mr. Tarus, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you this afternoon on a topic that touches on sustainable forest management, but more so from a lens of a landscape restoration and climate change lenses from Kenya. So I would start by giving you a snapshot of where Kenya is, and more so in terms of how are we doing in relation to the 3 resources. So Kenya is a country found within Africa, specifically within East Africa. And we are an area of 58.2 million hectares. And out of that 52.8 million hectares, 5.9% of our land is covered by forests. And this is based on an assessment that we did as part of the RED Plus process in 2020. In terms of how our forests resources are distributed, they are legally classified into 3. There's a category of public forests managed by the government for the benefits of its citizens, and it is translating to 2.6 million hectares. There's a category of community forests, which is forming the bulk of our natural forest, to almost 50%, and mostly it's administered by a subnational level of government on behalf of communities. And lastly, the private owned forest, which has a huge potential from our assessment, and I'll show you. Also, in our constitution, we are required to keep a minimum 10% tree cover. So when we did our assessment in 2021, we realized that Kenya in terms of its tree cover percentage is at 12.13%. So in summary, that's how the outlook of Kenya is. Basically, if you look at the scale of how our forest resources is, I would want to still put more sense to it, specifically in terms of the numbers. But number one, our population to up to 82% in one way or the other interact with a tree resource in form of biomass energy, in form of construction material, and many other resources. So it is of importance to us as a country. Secondly, also, statistics have showed that we have over 4 million citizens depending on that particular resource in form of job creation directly and indirectly. Another very critical element is also an attachment of that resource to our gross domestic product, which is a measure of our economy. We've estimated it at 3.5%, but of course it has excluded quite a number of other values that we think if we include it, it should be able to significantly increase. And this is an area as government, we are investing a lot of efforts to ensure that we really have an holistic evaluation of what the forest and tree resources is contributing to our economy. Of course, Kenya is a water-stressed country, a water-scarce country, if I may loosely translate. We have 80% of our land under arid and semi-arid conditions. So the integral role of trees and forests in that particular ecological functionality cannot be overstated. It is a huge, huge opportunity that we are also keen to see how we can be able to quantify and break the numbers around it. And of course, Kenya is known for its tea, coffee, and others. So the role of these tree resources in ensuring that it's providing the right climatic conditions for their thriving and supply globally cannot be understated. So that's in summary. I don't want to go into a lot of details. But of course, that same resource is not devoid of challenges. Like I said, 82% depend on this resource. So some of the challenges we've been able to identify, and they are shown in pictures, is we have situations where our own citizens feel that the best areas to settle in are those that are with forests. So we are still having those challenges of encroachment. We also have challenges of obstruction or extraction of materials that are not legally licensed. And just below is an enforcement officer looking at the amount of damage that has been done in an illegal manner. Agriculture, the need to produce food, has also found itself within our forest areas. Land degradation, but more importantly, in the recent times, the issues associated with climate change. Pests and diseases and other climate change related issues are some of the challenges that as forest sector in Kenya, we are already trying to grapple with and be able to manage. But of course, we are not painting a very bad picture. We have a plan of how to turn around our challenges into opportunities. And the first opportunity, which is a pet subject of our president himself, is we want to grow 15.7 billion trees, translating to 10.6 million hectares of our land. What would that mean? It means we would at least have our Kenya being covered by 30% of trees by the year 2032. I will still give you an opportunity of how that is going to be done in the next slide. 2.6 million hectares of our forests requires to be conserved and protected and managed in a way that is in tandem with the diverse uses, like I mentioned. The third very critical element that we've realized is that we need to create opportunities for investments. And where the investments are, in our own assessment, is in the private sector. Public funds will never be enough. So we are very deliberate to see how do we transform our policy and legislative environment to anchor private sector in a very robust way. And we're having quite a number of discussion around that subject matter. Promotion of agroforestry and commercial forestry. And I'm pleased that I already saw a picture of where the future looks like. The long story building showed by Japan, the discussion we're having with my friend here, Graham from Forest Climate Leaders Partnership, on how do we provide for commercial opportunities going into the building space, supporting food production systems, and many others. So those are some of our priorities as a country we're also looking into. But of course, we may not be able to do that minor research. So we are also very deliberate to ensure that research find its space, because it's from research. And I was happy, one of the statistics the Japanese team was able to achieve is a 3-hour-long fire resistance mark. And I believe that was done through research. So basically, those are some of the things we're also thinking. If we are to do even the 15 billion, we need to be informed critically by science. And lastly, are issues to do with governance. We talked over a mix of our forest tenure systems. We have private forest, we have public forest, we have community forest. All these have to exist in an harmonious environment. And the role of government, therefore, is to have the right policy and legislative environment for that to be able to be delivered. I mentioned of our target. So we've had a forward-looking picture of if we are able to do this 30% tree cover, what would it mean for us as a country? Number one, we have documented it in our supreme instrument that is guiding the country, our constitution, that we need to have a minimum 10% tree cover in those specific statutes of our constitution, specifically 69. But 43, 42, and 43 is also prescribing that it is the right of every citizen and visitor to Kenya to have clean, healthy environments. So if we do the 30%, we will hit that. Secondly, we looked at the jobs. Already we are at 4 million. And the numbers shows that we have an opportunity to grow those jobs by maybe double or even triple it if we are to develop the entire value chains around it. So it's a huge, huge opportunity for economics. Thirdly, Kenya, and that's where we are here in numbers, is we believe that we need to manage climate change. We need to contribute to the global good of addressing climate change. In our NDC, 50% of our emission reductions are to be achieved from forestry or the land use sector. So this 30% agenda squarely fit into our NDC commitment as a country. Communities, you saw the 49% of communities owning forests have opportunities in that space, and more so even in our own laws that are managing our forests. There is a whole chapter of community participation. So they have also a space. Biodiversity, we recently came out of a global framework on biodiversity, and the integral role of trees and forests in ensuring that that is achieved is also part of our thinking. That if we do this, we should be able to do that. Then lastly, the issues of desertification, the issues of aspiration to restore degraded landscape from Glasgow Leaders Declaration, the Aichi targets, the issues to do with the AFRI 100, and all other elements that are associated, even the UN decade of ecosystem restoration, all that is going to be delivered by this 30%. So we strongly feel if we do this, we would have been able to use one stone to kill 6 birds. So how are we intending to do this? We mapped our country. I don't want to take much of our time. We mapped our country. This is science-driven decision-making. In 2016, we did a comprehensive assessment of our land, and we realized that 38.8 million hectares of our land were not optimally performing what it's supposed to do, ranging from the forested areas to the croplands to our water ecosystems And we realized for us to transform and be able to achieve the 30%, these are the areas we need to be able to invest in. And these are the numbers we are already tracking. And we are basically using this tool to be able to document 1 tree, 2 tree, 50 trees, 100 million. And so far, we are way above 150 million trees already in the landscape since we launched the initiative. So in short, we are saying every year we should be doing 1.5 if we are to do that in 10 years. We missed a little bit the mark, but the engine now is well oiled. We need a little bit of support here and there, and hopefully we should be able to hit there. And by the way, this is a publicly available application. It's available in Google Play Store. It's available in App Store. If you download it, you're able to see for purposes of transparency and issues to do with monitoring. Every citizen of the country can be able to see we are at what point in terms of our agenda. So it's an awesome investment that we are putting in as government together with, of course, our partners. And we are calling this initiative all society, all governments. So everybody has a role. Finally, now towards the tail end, to be able to actualize, because I mentioned of the need to have everybody on board. I am part of a Japan-funded project called It's a long one, but we normally call them COREC in Kenya, meaning that it is aimed at strengthening the forest sector development and communities to be able to manage the issues of climate change and deliver, of course, sustainable forests and landscapes in the country. So this is a project that is running all the way to 2027, and it has 4 critical points of support. Issues to do with policy, and you realized I mentioned deliberately that we are doing policy strengthening. So this particular program or project is coming in to support the ministry to be able to have the right policies in place to support REDD+, to support monitoring, to support opportunities for green financing, because we see that is an opportunity for us to accelerate our targets. Number 2, it is also aimed at the commercial forestry, and we talked of our plan to have agroforestry and commercial forestry as part of our priority areas. So this particular project is coming in to be able to see how do we support Kenya. KFS is a short form of Kenya Forest Service, which is a public institution mandated to manage forests. And county means county governments. They are supporting the communities in ensuring that their forests are well managed. So it's delivering that. Issues to do with research, the dynamics around climate change, of course, and others needs that we need to equip our Kenya Forest Research Institution to be able to give us superior germplasm, more so speaking to our arid and semi-arid areas where I talked of an area of almost 80%. And then, of course, regional collaboration, supporting our neighbors to be able also to be part and parcel of the process. So those are the main outlooks of what we should be able to deliver down the road. Number 1 are issues to do with policy. I think I've mentioned that. Commercial forestry, research specifically for those 2 species. Melia volengensi is in the family of, it's an ebony. It's an hardwood, growing very fast under water stress condition with 500 millimeters a year, 15 years, you have good wood of high quality. Acacia totalis, it's also another dryland species that is good. It has the ability to provide energy and other non-wood products around gum and resin. So those are the directions we are thinking. But of course, now capacities of institutions to support the region, because we have good neighborly relations with our neighbors, and it's been a training hub for a while. So, so basically, progresses in terms of policy support. Already there are quite a number of issues. We've done a deep dive to inform our policy. We've done a deep dive to be able to develop our strategy. And we are even now going to the nitty-gritties of where the rubber meets the road, thinking of how do we have a very innovative way of ensuring that schools get lunch, and at the same time, they're able to start growing trees. And by the way, I didn't tell you, of the 15.7 billion that we are to grow, 30% of those are fruit trees, because it's important to the nutrition of our kids in school, and it has also a serious economic opportunities around that. So we're already piloting that in those schools. And of course, once we get the results, it should be shared widely to all of us for adoption. Issues to do with the monitoring, I mentioned the Jazamiti app that I showed, but we have also a comprehensive national forest monitoring system together with forest information platform that are to guide and manage how we are doing as a country as part of the bigger picture, most likely tracking on the tree cover. Down the road, we should be able to introduce the sustainability, traceability, the value chains, and the chain of custody, tracking also where we are getting these seeds, and many other issues that we feel needs to be enhanced as part of the upgrade of our national forest monitoring system. Of course, commercial forestry, already quite a number of issues have been undertaken, including already recruitment of farmers to be part and parcel of the process. Tree breeding components, already this is how things are morphing out. We are going into, for the geneticists, this is how we are looking at that. We by the time we should be able to have even the fourth or the fifth generation of high improved yielding Melia. Because this, I don't want to go into the details, but it is an enormous tree called in local language Mukau, or Melia volcansa for the scientists, of regreening the arid and semi-arid areas. So we are deliberate to ensure that we improve on the qualities around the timber productivity, their growth rates and others. So the scientists are already doing that, and we are hopeful to be able to improve on that. Regional cooperations, already there are quite a number of discussions with our neighbors, Tanzania, all the way to South Sudan and others. And we should be able to start now piloting and doing capacity support to our neighbors across that region. I was once trained in Japan. I was in Nobuhiro. I went to Tokyo, and I learned, I can't pronounce the first one because I know that is Iringana, or if Aringano, yeah. So, but I know arigato gozaimasu. Then thank you very much. Then merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarus, for your informative talk. More than 20 years ago, I've been to Kefri in Kitsui as an expert of remote sensing in JICA project for social forest. So I remember the past. So I move to next speaker. Next speaker is Dr. Sheam Satkuru. She is Executive Director, ITTO. Today, she would give us the talk about also sustainable wood use from the international viewpoint. So, Dr. Satkuru, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Akamoto-san, and also to Hirata-san for the wonderful introduction earlier. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and konnichiwa to our Japanese colleagues. Before I go any further, I wish to express my fullest gratitude to the government of Japan and the Forest Agency for their continuous and full support for hosting the International Tropical Timber Organization in Yokohama, Japan. So Japan is our home country, as well as our host country. Now, My first question is, how many of you do not know who ITTO is? Don't be embarrassed to put your hands up. Who doesn't know ITTO? Stick your hands up really high. Okay, I'd say about 30% of the audience today. Anyway, the International Tropical Timber Organization was established 36 years ago. And Japan is the first and only host country that has hosted this organization. It consists of 75 members, a nice 50-50 divide between producers and consumers. And the whole idea of the ITTO is governed by the International Tropical Timber Agreement that was negotiated under the auspices of the United Nations Conference of Trade and Development in Geneva. So the focus, of course, is international cooperation and collaboration. I wish to thank our previous speakers from the Forest Agency in Japan for the keynote speech as well, and to our colleague from Kenya for highlighting the national measures that are being put in place. And as I go through my slides, I will race through this because we need to make a little bit of time for the next speaker also. You will see how much what you're doing is actually very much in line with what ITTO has been pursuing for the last 36 years, together with our international collaborative partners and also with our member countries, consisting of our producer and consumer countries. So I don't think I need to tell you too much about how important tropical forests are. I've just put some points which are key details that you need to be aware of, which actually highlights the extreme importance as to why tropical forests, when sustainably managed, are critical to climate change mitigation and adaptation. That has been the focus of ITTO's advocacy efforts for at least the last 7 years as the climate change talks heat up. So we have been present at practically every conference of the parties over the last 7 years. And incrementally each year, our participation increases and we are getting some recognition, but it's not yet enough. So we need people like you in the audience to be following our work. And for those of you who believe in the critical importance of sustainably managing and sustainably using tropical forests, please follow our social media and advocate the same points that we are also advocating. This I would urge all of you to do strongly. Now, it's a pity that Kenya is not a member country, but we can discuss this later. I'll be pleased to do that. Still, as you can see from the slides, over 70% of the poor, those who live in extreme poverty, live in the tropics. This is why sustainable wood use is extremely important to the revenues of these countries. You know, the general perception is cutting a tree is not good. That's the idea. Huh? But in our countries, my home country is Malaysia, by the way. We have had a long tradition of wood use, and the domestic consumption of wood is almost as high as the export quantities. So that shows when forests are sustainably managed, it is a cyclical source of the most environmentally friendly and the most cost-efficient material in meeting climate change mitigation and adaptation. Now, the shocking figure is because of the financial crisis and the global challenges, the political conflicts that the world is currently facing, the latest IMF report estimates that over 95 million people are living in acute poverty. So this is in addition to the 70 living in extreme poverty. There's a fine line in dividing extreme poverty and acute poverty. But that's a big number of people who need to rely on the natural resource base simply because not all tropical countries are at the same level of development and advancement. And as an organization, it is ITTO's mandate. Benefits of tropical forestry, you already know. It is ITTO's mandate, which is a double-pronged mandate. The first half of this mandate is to help our countries to implement sustainable forest management, particularly in the tropical producing countries. The second half of the mandate, of course, is to diversify the trade in wood and non-wood forest products, provided they are sourced from legally and sustainably managed forest resources. That is a key. It is a key factor that countries need to pursue. And I'm proud to say that we are the sole intergovernmental organization that has a complete focus on tropical forestry. And on top of that, we are also very proud to be the only international organization and intergovernmental organization to be headquartered in Japan. Our pilot program lines, it matches everything that all the previous speakers have said. There are 4 here. The key ones, of course, is legal and sustainable supply chains. This is our most popular programmatic line at this point. Conservation of biodiversity and ecosystem services comes a close second to third. Forest landscape restoration and resilient livelihoods is another one that we are vigorously pursuing, and we need donor support for this. And the last one is emerging issues and innovation, which ties in not just to innovation in the forestry arena, but also innovation in the processing sector. Most of our work has evolved around timber tracking projects, sustainable forest management. This is all background reading. It's homework reading for all of you. But please do take a look, because we have a compendium of more than 1,400 projects that has been implemented by ITTO in the 37 years of its lifetime. They are all available on the ITTO website, and we can group them into different elements of what we are pursuing now in terms of natural resource conservation. Again, please note that there is a big difference between conservation, preservation, and total protection. I will not bore you with the details because I'm sure that many of you already know the differences between those 3, but the differences is what determines what you can do with a particular forest area in order to forward national priorities in line with international expectations and commitments. So we also do a lot of work on market access, traceability, and certification. And I'm focusing more on these areas because the topic I was asked to speak on today was sustainable wood use for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So again, a lot of homework and background reading. We have a lot of policy briefs and technical documents, which are very helpful for countries that are embarking on these processes, which is why for non-ITTO member countries, if ever you need a resource to refer to, please click on our website. All the guidance is there. If there is something more that you need, email Secretariat, please, and we will do our utmost to help you. Because for us, of course, the membership is always our core priority, but the non-members are also becoming a priority because we share the same aims and objectives of furthering our natural resource sustainable management. So we have continuous updates on timber markets, and this is a wonderful slide that I wanted to share with all of you. Every project that we execute is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals and also to ITTO's Strategic Action Plan, the latest of which spans from 2022 to 2026. So we are almost entering the 3rd year of our Strategic Action Plan. This slide is part of an effort where ITTO is a co-lead in an international joint initiative under the Collaborative Partnership on Forests. Who is aware what the Collaborative Partnership on Forests is? Do you know who they are? Okay, it's a coalition. For those who don't, it's a coalition of 16 international organizations, and the ITTO, I dare say, is particularly one of the smallest ones in that grand coalition of 16 international organizations. But this particular joint initiative, Sustainable Wood for a Sustainable World, SW4SW, is one of the key initiatives that ITTO's work contributes to, because it includes both sustainable forest management as well as the use of wood and non-wood forest products. So this slide was commissioned by ITTO from a firm of environmentally friendly eco-architects who are based in New Zealand. And it all came out of drawings on a piece of paper. I'm pretty good at caricatures sometimes, just for fun, because sometimes visuals make it a little bit easier for people to kind of understand what it is that you're trying to convey. And this architect, because he's an architect, he's so good at actually drawing. And I said, look, let's link this to all the SDG goals. And this is what we produced by working together. Now, you can see that forestry and sustainable wood use contributes to almost every of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So the core in the center is where we belong, and all the prongs which branch into all the different SDGs is where we also belong and where most of you also belong. So if ever you wish to use this slide, please feel free just to ask us and give credit. Give credit to Sion, that is the name of the architects whom we commissioned, and please give credit to ITTO and FAO because we are the co-leads on the CPF joint initiative. So promoting sustainable wood use, we heard Ms. Ekizen from the Forest Agency earlier talking about the 4 different projects that the Forest Agency is funding for ITTO to execute. Now, the main focus of these projects that are being executed in Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand is to actually assess the levels of domestic wood use and to check to see whether they have promotional materials and promotional efforts. Well, Malaysia is very advanced in that respect, and so is Indonesia. Thailand, to a slightly lesser extent. Vietnam is also incredibly advanced because Vietnam has beaten Malaysia and Indonesia to be one of the world's largest exporters of furniture products. So they have an immense processing capacity. So, you know, they've, like I said, they've overtaken the major producers, but Malaysia and Indonesia have a larger product diversified catalog, which they deal with. So they still export other forms of wood products like plywood, sawn timber, moldings, furniture accessories, you know, all those different other bits of wood, which are generally offcuts, and in the olden days, they were all burnt. Fortunately, a number of the tropical countries, because they have been processing and using wood for many, many years, they have advanced their processing capacity to levels that are unimaginable. So even offcuts are put into processed products. And what's not actually on that slide, but I know many countries are doing it, is even sawdust becomes valuable. Sawdust is used to heat the kiln dryers, which you use to kiln dry raw materials before you export them in order to comply with the phytosanitary regulations under ISPM 15. So again, there's a whole catalog of regulations that need to be observed in terms of processing. But the outcomes of this, all these projects that we're executing, particularly this sustainable wood use projects, we use it as ITTO's and Japan's inputs and contribution to the CPF SW4-SW joint initiative as our contribution in kind. Because it's not so easy to raise funding through the CPF fraternity. All right. Now, whenever we talk about sustainable development, what is extremely clear to at least the ITTO fraternity is that we need to think of this in 3 different elements: social, economic, and environmental/ecological. You can't do one without the other, or one and not the third. It always has to be all 3 elements taken into consideration. Now, the next few slides is just to give you some brief information on what's going on in these 4 projects. But these are not the only 4 projects that we have done on sustainable wood use. Like I said, please check our database on the website. You'll find the whole list of stuff that we have used. So climate change mitigation and adaptation. So why is it so important? Now, implementing SFM practices across wood supply chains will lower emissions. And why is that? Because by sustainably managing the forest, you're actually harvesting and you're promoting natural regeneration. Certain countries, of course, will need silvicultural practices in terms of assisted planting and seeding. And that is also a very normal forestry practice in many tropical countries in order to enrich the regeneration of natural forests. And I'm so happy to hear that this concept of planted forests is becoming a little more acceptable. 20 years ago, well, I've been in the field for 30 years. 20 years ago, it wasn't looked upon favorably. But now, because the climate challenges are becoming so acute, there is no other option but to start planting trees where the soil and the ambience and environment is suitable. But you need to find a use for those trees as well, no? Because we need to think about what will happen in 40 years' time when we are overcovered with trees. Might that start another cycle of different climatic challenges? Could that be? I usually think a little bit outside the box, but so this is food for thought. What happens when we have too much of it? without a use for it. Something for another day, not today. But it's a future made of wood that we need to think about. And again, tropical forest functions, as I said, we're the largest, most effective sequesters. We store effectively also for the life cycle of the products that you're using. The standing trees are perpetual carbon storage until they are felled, and the new seedling that grows will restart that whole process all over again. And the use of wood products, carbon storage, as I said, mitigates climate change challenges. So please look up all our QR codes. Website is there. Our social media channels are on the left. Do appreciate the work that ITTO is doing because it's for all our future, particularly the youth in the room. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Satkuru, from a different aspect of wood use. So I move to next speaker. Next speaker is Dr. Takashi Okamoto. He is a researcher of my institute, Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute.
So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Takashi Okamoto from Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute, Japan. So today, I'd like to share some Japanese original forest management techniques for disaster prevention, and also possibility of the application into developing countries. So, as you know, Japan has suffered from many kinds of sediment disasters, as shown in these photographs. And now, so I will show you an interesting painting. This painting is called ukiyo-e, which was created 200 years ago. So from this painting, you can see some pine trees just along the road, but there is no rich forest in the mountainous area. So this painting suggests that Japan has a long history of deforestation and sediment disasters. So now I'd like to show you some example of the successful forest restoration in Japan. So the photograph on the left shows the Ashio area in 1955. So the area had been devastated by overlogging and other kinds of factors. After that, the Forest Agency of Japan started a large-scale afforestation project using original, it's kind of just like innovative techniques. And also, 55 years later, after 55 years, so the forest has been completely recovered. So this is due to disaster prevention function of forest. We call it FDRR. It means forest-based disaster risk reduction. And we also expect some other benefit from forest, like climate change mitigation, water resources conservation, and so on. So as mentioned in the previous slide, we have the original techniques for forest management for the disaster prevention. We call it Chisan in Japanese. So this photo shows one of the techniques named the simple terracing works. You can see the lined wooden log linked by wires. So these logs prevent sheet erosion and make a good environment for trees to grow. So the figure on the bottom is a change in the number of sediment disasters. As these techniques have become more widespread, the number of the sediment disasters in Japan has gradually decreased for past 40 years. So we believe that our original techniques for forest management can contribute to forest restoration in developing countries as well. So we have a joint research project. So we have a joint research project with Vietnam on how we can utilize our original techniques. So the photograph you can see, you can see many landslides caused by heavy rainfalls. And these landslides are frequent in degraded forest and abandoned cultivated land on the steep slopes. So this is another photograph of a slope in Vietnam. There is no rich forest along the roadside slopes. You can see devastated slope caused by abandoned cultivation. I believe that Japan's original forest management techniques have significant technical potential to restore forest in such devastated area. On the other hand, in Vietnam, due to poverty problem, mountain slopes tend to be used as farmland. When we consider the restoration of forest, forest, we have to consider not only the natural environment aspects, but also on the socio-economic conditions in each country, each areas. So now I'd like to conclude my presentation and also would like to mention some our challenges in the future. So Japan's history with deforestation and the landslides has led to original forest management techniques focused on disaster prevention and mitigation. And their techniques hold a great potential for significant contributions to forest restoration in developing countries. However, with successful forest restoration also requires addressing social and economic issues in each developing countries. It's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okamoto. So quick presentation. Because of limitation of time, unfortunately, we don't have the time to have panel discussion. So we have only 6 minutes. So only 1 or 2 questions I received. So do you have any question? Okay, if you have any question for each speaker, so after this event, please ask directly. Thank you very much for your comprehension to close our session. So thank you very much for all speakers. Your wonderful and informative presentation. Of course, sustainable forest management has long history, but in the context of climate change, still it is very important. Also, sustainable wood use also. So today's talks give us very useful to consider to tackle climate change. So thank you very much all. So I close the session. Thank you very much.